You're watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.
Welcome into the Toronto Sports Rush. EJ Hradek with you. Remember, like and subscribe to the channel. We got a lot of great content for you. And as part of that, with the trade deadline coming up, we've got Mr. Craig Button, who is the director of scouting for TSN. He was the one-time general manager of the Calgary Flames. And if you do just a very cursory look at the Stanley Cup, and you look to the 1998-99 Dallas Stars, you'll see Craig Button's name there, part of a great management team that helped the Stars win the Cup in 99. Craig, thanks for the time, and I want to get right to it here. The deadline is just around the corner on Friday. The Toronto Maple Leafs, it hasn't been the season they'd hoped for. Injury, underperformance, miscalculation, whatever you want to say, but we're sitting here a couple of days out. You've been in the manager's chair. What would you do in this spot if you're the Leafs?
Well, the first thing you have to do is just stare reality in the face. There's no other way to put it. I mean, it's one thing to say, hey, listen, we were besieged by injuries. You know, we had some things that go against us. And there's some teams that fall into that at different points in time, even this year. But for the Toronto Maple Leafs, despite the promise of the last number of years, and it was legitimate promise, this was a contending team. They are no longer a contending team. And whatever you're going to do now to think that you're a contending team is only going to hurt you from being a contending team. They are not going to be a contending team next year. They're not going to be a contending team the year after. Where they find themselves, an older roster, not enough depth, not enough strength throughout their lineup, doesn't put you back into contending status. So when you look at like a number of really good players, Austin Matthews, William Nylander, Matthew Nyes, really good players. That's not enough good players to contend. It's not even enough to come close. Prospect cupboard is essentially bare. Selections in the draft, not very many. And so the reality of the situation for the Toronto Maple Leafs is you got to start moving to try to get younger, to try to find draft picks, to try to find prospects. And it's not easy. But back in 2014, when Brendan Shanahan undertook this task, we saw what it led to, and it led to something that was promising. And this is not a time to debate whether they did this right or they didn't do that right. It was a promising era for the Toronto Maple Leafs. If they want to get back to that, they're going to have to do similar things that they did in 2014. As Mike Babcock, who came in as coach, said, he said very clearly that for this, there's going to be a lot of pain. There's going to be a lot of pain here. And I think it's very similar. And if you don't face reality, the pain will only become that much greater.
All right. So in the shorter window of the deadline itself, is this a time to consider bigger moves, or is that something that has to wait until the offseason when maybe you have more suitors?
I think it's always best to wait till the offseason. You know, you're going to have teams that have fallen short for one reason or another, whatever their expectations are. And so when you have more teams and you have more cap space, I think you have greater opportunity. And I think that's the time. Unless something comes across your lap that is really significant, I think now what you do is you plant seeds. Now, is that the tilling of the earth, or are you actually planting seeds? But I think the tilling of the earth has to begin, and the Toronto Maple Leafs have to look at this really seriously.
So, Craig, I get the sense from listening to you that, like, you know, trading Matthews, trading Nylander are things you have to consider. Now, obviously, you're not giving these guys away, but you have to consider talking about it because, like you say, I mean, this is an older roster, and it doesn't get younger on its own.
No, and again, so let's look at the contending window, so to speak. Austin Matthews' contract is up in 2 years after this year. They're not contending in that period of time. I don't care if you have Austin Matthews, you don't. You're not a contender. So you have to open up your mind to that, because if you don't, how are you going to find a way to improve? And as difficult as it is, and it's the captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs, you have to hear what other teams are willing to do. And I mean, there's going to be lots of suitors, lots of interest in Austin Matthews. But at the same time, for the Toronto Maple Leafs, it's about opening up your phone lines, opening up your minds to what you can do. Because here's the reality, EJ, and I went through this in Calgary with Jerome Iginla, superstar, great player. And I had to show to Jerome Iginla, here's what we're doing to improve the team to give you a chance. I don't think the Toronto Maple Leafs can do that with Austin Matthews there. So that leads you now to have to consider moving Matthews, moving Nylander, and making moves to try to move it forward.
All right, in the shorter term, the deadline coming up, what can they do in the next couple of days? I mean, there's been a lot of talk about Bobby McMahon. I mean, he's been a good find for them, a good player for them. Like I don't know what you're getting for someone like Bobby McMahon. Maybe a OEL. I don't know if Morgan Riley is somebody that's movable at this point in time. But give me your thoughts on these next couple of days, what they can do in the short term.
Yeah, Morgan Riley, I think, is much like Matthews and Nylander. That's an off-season move in my view. But you start to look. Bobby McMahon's a free agent. Scott Laughton's a free agent. Oliver Ekman-Larsson, I think, would be a terrific addition to a team trying to strengthen their group going into the playoffs. He's got term left, a very reasonable term. But Bobby McMahon and Scott Laughton. I mean, Scott Laughton fetched a first-round draft pick for the Philadelphia Flyers. So could you get a first round draft pick for Scotland? I don't think so. But at his cap hit at $1.5 million, I think that would be tremendous for a team. Oh, maybe the Edmonton Oilers, like trying to get in and dive in on a player like that, right? Oliver Ekman-Larsson, teams are always looking to add defensemen. You look at the top teams, and we go to Tampa Bay, and we go to Dallas, and Minnesota, and Colorado, Vegas, perhaps Edmonton, Carolina. Like those are the teams now that are looking to try to strengthen their group, and I think OEL would do that. I think Bobby McMahon would do that. I think Scott Laughton would do it. They all do it in different ways, but that's where you got to open up your minds, and you got to listen to what teams are willing to do.
How about Nick Waugh? There's another guy that they got him from Vegas. He's been a part of a cup-winning team. I don't think there's a lot left on his deal. He's a pretty affordable guy. It's another guy I think they could probably shop.
Well, no question. Again, not leaving out Nick Waugh, but you're absolutely right. Those are the players you have to. And why wouldn't teams? You're tight to the cap, right? Most teams are tight to the cap. So now you're looking. That's why Nylander, Riley, Matthew, EP 40 in Vancouver. Those are big deals with lots of money, and the cap space. It's really hard to maneuver through that, and you have less teams. So to me, Nicolas Waugh, who adds that element, that size, that weight. We see how important that is to competing for a Stanley Cup and winning a Stanley Cup. Yeah, that's what you have to do. I mean, the roster for the Toronto Maple Leafs going into Friday post-deadline, it could be absent 4 or 5 players. Max Domi, would somebody be interested in Max Domi, right? So if I'm Brad Treliving, I'm open to everything. Yeah, to not be open to everything would be a dereliction of duties, and I say that very loosely.
Craig, let me go back to Matthews because, obviously trading someone like that would be, that's a huge consideration for any franchise. I mean, he is the centerpiece of their team. He's been for a while. He's the captain of their team. Now, Brad Treliving has been in situations where he's made some big trades. In Calgary, he moved Matthew Tkachuk, ended up getting a bunch of pieces back. Didn't really work out for him in that particular case. But what would it take? Like, if you're looking at the bigger picture, you're going to trade an Austin Matthews. What do you need in return? I would imagine you need several pieces.
Well, don't imagine. You know it, EJ. You need, players, prospects, draft picks. But we're talking about a superstar. We're talking about arguably the best goal scorer in the National Hockey League. Not arguably, in the last number of years, there's nobody better than Austin Matthews when it comes to goal scoring, right? So that's why you can't spend 2 days hearing what teams are willing to do. There will be teams that go, "Hey, Brad, we'll give you this, we'll give you that," right? And you just what you do, you just jot down notes. Okay, Team X just poking around, not serious. Oh, Team A, we had a good conversation, and now you're building it out, right? Bottom line is you have to open it up, and the best way to open it up to get more is to deal on disappointment from teams, whether it be a performance, missing in the playoffs, thinking you have another guy, marketing, all those things that matter. There's way more opportunity with the disappointment of teams not getting to where they want to get to than there is leading into the trade deadline. So Austin Matthews, listen, I'm not sitting here. Maybe there's areas that they feel they can improve their team in and that keeps Austin Matthews. I just think you have to open it up. You have to open up your minds to it. And that's an off-season move. That ain't a today move.
Craig, when I look at this team, last year they won their division. I would say that I could argue that if they had won that game 7 against Florida, maybe they go on to the Cup final. Maybe they win the Cup. Who knows? But it has fallen off this year. That defense is on particular. Tanev he's a guy that's been nicked up in his career. He's a really good player when he's healthy, but he's getting into his mid to late 30s. They've got other older guys on defense. Is that really where the biggest problem has been in your mind, that they just are too old and slow on defense and can't generate the kind of speed it takes to be successful?
Yeah, I think that's one major area. I do think that is one major area. Hey, listen, Chris Tanev is one of those players you want on your side. You're going into a hard game. You want Chris Tanev on your side. He never left a team short in terms of respect or competitive spirit. But when you start looking at a 36-year-old player and you're counting on that player to turn your fortunes around, that's misguided. And the team doesn't handle the puck very well. They don't get out of their zone very easily, and now that affects your offense. That affects your offensive players. I don't think they have enough offensive depth. I think that they're short on the offensive depth in the forward group. So when we start to look, then you have goaltenders that have shown real capability but not availability because of injuries. And I'm not here to blame, and I'm not suggesting, but their goaltending last year was really good. Their goaltending this year at spots has been good. But there's too many areas of your team that are far, far short of being able to contend with the best teams. I'll give you an example, EJ. They come out of the Olympic break, they go into Tampa. They can't play that game. They can't find a way to stay with. Then they go on the next night into Florida, and they can't stay in that game against that team. Then they go against Ottawa, who right in their province, and they're trying to find their way, and they can't stay in that game. So what game can they play in? I mean, they might have to go play in Switzerland in a friendly to find a game that they can have some success. So you can't kid yourself. The hardest thing to do at this point in time is to see your team as it is, and if you don't, then opportunities are going to be missed.
Greg, let me ask you about the deadline itself and just some of the players, because you follow these players. Like, I know when we talk, like if I mention a guy, you could say, well, I saw him when he was 15. I saw him when he was 14. You've watched their whole development in your role as the director of scouting at TSN. Let me ask you about Robert Thomas, because there's a name that has come up now, part of the St. Louis Blues. This is a guy you wouldn't have thought that Robert Thomas would be somebody that would be available, but you talked about disappointment. It's been a disappointing time in St. Louis. They're thinking about maybe making some changes. His name is out there. I feel like he's a good player. Give me your thoughts on Robert Thomas as the player and, what it might take to get someone like that at this stage.
Well, let me take a step back on Robert. Okay, so Robert won a Memorial Cup in London with Dale Hunter. He won a Stanley Cup in St. Louis. He was a candidate for the Canada's Olympic team that just played in Milano. So now you start to look at the pedigree. You start to look at what the player is. So he's had an off year. He's been injured. Okay, so the team has had an off year. So you better be careful. And I know Doug Armstrong is very measured in everything. And what I think Doug is doing is exactly what I think the Toronto Maple Leafs need to do. We're open. Tell us what you think. Bobby Clark told me this years ago when he was the manager in Philadelphia, and I was in Calgary, and it was around Joe McGinley. He says, Craig, you don't have to say yes. You just wait and wait and wait. And if they force you to say yes, well, then, then you're in a good spot. And the key thing there is just force you to say yes. And so Doug Armstrong can be sitting there and going, some team might force me to say yes on Robert Thomas. I think Robert Thomas is an elite two-way center. I think that just because he's had an off year in the St. Louis Blues, I'd be all over trying to find a way to get Robert Thomas. EJ, when we were in Dallas, and Doug would remember this because he was assistant manager in Dallas at the time. We had a long dance with the Edmonton Oilers and Glenn Sather on Ryan Smith. Ryan Smith wasn't playing very well, and when I say a long dance, it was months. Finally, Glenn Sather phoned one day, and he said to Bob, Bob Gainey, he goes like, Yeah, he goes, I think what we've talked about is reasonable. I think it's good. He goes, I know this kid too well. I like him too much. Yeah, he hasn't had a great year. I understand why you'd want him, but we're not going to trade him.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
so could have we pushed it over the line by maybe offering a little bit more? Perhaps you can always say the what if, right? But the point I'm making is when you know your own player and you believe in that player, you better be careful. And so because teams are ready to poach, and I've said this often, like, you're in the middle of the water, the waves are coming over your head, managers are coming by, and they're going, here's a life jacket, here's a life jacket. And you grab onto it and you realize it's an anchor. That's what it is. It's an anchor. They want to sink you. They don't want to
Yeah.
save you. So you better
Yeah.
save yourself. I'd be all over Robert Thomas. I got asked this question just really quickly here. They said, if you're Montreal and you could get Robert Thomas, would you trade Michael Hage? I love Michael Hage. I'd trade Michael Hage in a second
Yeah.
to get Robert Thomas. And that's not a knock against Michael Hage. That's the price of getting Robert Thomas.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, listen, you got to sometimes to get really good players, you got to give up significant assets in return, and that's how it works. I'll
Yep.
ask you about another player, Nazem Kadri in Calgary. I mean, they're coming inching close to the deadline here. Calgary Flames rebuilding. I guess it's more of a rebuild than a retool. People can call it whatever they want. The bottom line is it's not going well right now, and they're looking to build for the future. But Nazem Kadri, I mean, what do you see left? I know you're based in Calgary. What is left in his game? Can he be a guy that can be really helpful? He obviously was the Stanley Cup winner in Colorado a couple of years ago.
No question. Naz has game, and Naz has game left. Though yeah, he's got 3 years left on his contract. Like, and you start looking, okay, what would it look like in 3 years' time? I don't care. I mean, I think Naz can come in and help a team tremendously right now. I think he can help a team next year, and certainly, the role that you would ask him to play is very different. He's playing a frontline role in Calgary. The
Yeah.
team can't support him as well as they can, but it has not been from lack of ability, it has not been lack of capability, and Naz has done. But Naz has got 3 years left on his contract, and
Yeah.
Nazem Kadri would be a very attractive player. But again, like the Flames are looking to 27, 28 season. They got a lot of good young players. They're not going to throw their young players to the wolves. They are going to. They want players that can be around their young guys. You don't want to just take guys and push them up and say you can play more minutes. And I think Craig Conroy's done a really nice job of that. I hear this often, EJ. Well, they got to get something for those players. Well, maybe what they're getting for those players
Yeah.
is the benefit of the young players learning from them because they all have term. I hear Mackenzie Weegar's name out there. You hear Blake Coleman's name. I understand it. But I don't think this is the Calgary Flames making calls outward. I think this
Yeah.
is teams saying, hey, what would it take? What would it take? And maybe Craig Conroy says yes, but they don't have to move these guys unless it's something that really makes sense for them. And I don't think the Calgary Flames are looking to let's get another draft pick in 2028 for Nazem Kadri. If teams want to be serious, make them say yes.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, listen, there's no question. I mean, it's a good position to be in if people are that interested. Maybe you get more than you even thought you could. I'll ask
Yep.
you about another couple of centers, Vinny Trocheck and Ryan O'Reilly. Now, O'Reilly, it seems like he would like to stay in Nashville. Trocheck, he came to New York. I think he wants to be a Ranger, but I think he's aware of the situation there. Those are two more guys. I guess I'm talking about centers here that could maybe help a team. What do you make of those guys? And do you expect maybe one or both those guys to be moved by Friday?
Vinny Trocheck's a really good player, and
Yeah.
maybe he should go to Anaheim where Trouba and Kreider have
Yeah.
have excelled. I mean, I think Vinny would be a nice fit there. You think
Yeah.
about where the Anaheim Ducks. Hey, listen, I think Pat Verbeek has done phenomenal work.
Yeah.
Signs Gudis, signs Killorn, then he gets Trouba and he gets Kreider. They've been. I know how good the young players are in Anaheim. Without those four guys, those young guys do not get the same benefit of experience and being protected, and it's been great. I think Trocheck would be an excellent addition. Term left on his contract, he'd be a really good addition for any number of teams. He plays hard. He's got an edge. He digs in. It matters to him. So I would want Vinny Trocheck. Now I'm going to say this about the Nashville Predators are right on the cusp of making the
Mhm.
playoffs. Okay, they're right on. I know they lost on Monday, but that's okay. Like Ryan O'Reilly committed there for 4 years as a free agent. Steven Stamkos, and they're having great years. What are you going to do? Go and trade them? and now tell your fans and your other players, yeah, winning isn't that important for us. I said this, EJ. I said if absent a ransom package in return for either one of those guys, okay, they would be on the precipice of stupid to trade those guys at this point in time. That's what I think.
All right. Well, I don't disagree with the Nashville, especially in the West. I mean, Nashville's
Yeah,
sitting right there, and nobody seems to want it in the West right now. It's kind of it's
exactly.
been a little crazy. So I think they're very easily with the Predators, with a good goaltender and Saros, with Yossi, with some of the other guys they have there. They've been playing well. You know, why couldn't they get in the West right now?
You're exactly
Hey,
right. And look what they
hey, look.
did. Hey, against Vancouver a couple years ago, they gave Vancouver fits.
Yep.
And with the goaltending, and they found their game. They've played really well since December 1st. This has been a good team.
Yeah, and let's face it too. They could easily end up not being wild card one. They could be the wild card or whatever. They could be in a situation maybe they play in the Pacific Division playoffs, and now
Bingo.
all of a sudden the Pacific Division. I mean, good luck. I mean, it seems like who knows what's going to happen there when the time comes. Nobody's really playing that great. Vegas leads the division, and they're playing pretty poorly right now. Let me ask you about Vegas because they always do things right. They want to win yesterday, Greg. I always keep an eye on them. Do you think that they would make maybe a son of a shakeup? They need some help in goal. I mean, the Leafs have Stolars, they have Wall, they have Hildeby played well when he was called upon. There's other what's the goalie market look like in his Vegas part of that?
Well, okay, so let me rewind here. There's only one thing that's hurting the Vegas Golden Knights. Their goaltending's terrible.
Yeah,
It's right at the bottom of the league, right near the bottom of the league. So their team is good. Their team has played well, and goaltending's been awful. So what you just mentioned three guys in Toronto. And if the Vegas Golden Knights don't find a way to get a goaltender, or to hope that one of their goaltenders gets better, they're
yeah,
going nowhere. Our dear friend Tim Bernhardt always had a line. He goes, "They're going nowhere fast on a turbo,"
yep.
because that is the only thing holding back that team in Vegas.
Mhm. Yeah, so the goaltender market is always interesting. I mean, we saw what Edmonton did early in the year. It hasn't really worked out thus far. I
No.
guess it. Craig, we talk about guys making hope passes. Some of these hope trades, I think that go on. You're hoping that they're going to work out, but it hasn't so far. Last thing before I let you go, Craig. I mean, you've been in that seat. What's it like on that day for a manager, especially a guy who, let's just focus on the guys who are selling right now because there's not as many sellers. What's it like sitting there on that day?
Well, I think there's two parts of it. The part of it is you have to assess like the seriousness of others, the trading partners per se.
Yeah.
Like where are you at in the pecking order? If you don't read that right, you know what happens when the music stops? You're looking around for a chair, and there might
Yeah.
not be a chair. So I think you have to have a real sense of what's reasonable and what's not, because as the clock ticks down, you don't have time to pick it up again. And they just had 3 weeks during the Olympic break to go and talk and everything. You have to have a firm grip on what's reasonable. That's number one. Number two is you also have to have a sense of, okay, like you have a number of teams involved, right? Like you're the seller. You have a number of teams involved, and you're saying, okay, could there be a better deal here? Could there be a better deal there? You have to have that sense of timing. It's like buying a house. No, this is the right time. Buying a stock. Because if you're going to try to time the market, you might be without a chair again when the music stops. So again, say and it goes without saying you got to be honest with teams, right? And the minute you make a decision that you're moving in a direction, let's say I'm going to trade player X, and you let everybody know, hey, we're out, which gives them time. You want to take it down to the wire, and I went through it. Would you go through it in management where you're talking, then all of a sudden somebody wants to take it down to the wire, and you go, we're not making a deal with them. And sure enough, 9 times out of 10, that team phones back at the last second. Oh, okay, we'll do this. Too late. The final buzzer has gone.
Yeah.
Game
Yeah.
over. Like
Yeah.
honestly, like so, and all you find out is how unorganized some front offices are. And trust me, there's a number of them that are.
Yes, for sure. That I think we've seen over the years, and I'm sure we'll see it again as we move forward this week. But Craig, thanks so much for the time. I really appreciate it. I know you're a busy guy. Look forward to your deadline coverage there at TSN coming up later in the week. Should be interesting. But thanks again, my friend.
Yeah, my pleasure, EJ.
All right, Craig Button, TSN. He'll be part of their draft deadline coverage. And this has been the Toronto Sports Rush right here on the Bet Rivers Network.
Thanks for watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.